Well, hello. I hope everyone is able to connect to this broadcast. We've had a couple of technical hitches. Well, these things do happen, even when you didn't plan for them to happen. At least we've been able to get back on stream. For those of you who had connected to this platform, I've seen some of your comments, and it's good to know that we are back on stream right now. Well, I'm Shola Adesoi. Welcome to the conversation. I believe that we are in for, truly amazing time this evening. And we've got a guest that is really loaded and has such depth of understanding and is going to be coming up in a little while. But while we just wait for everybody else to connect, I'll be showing you a couple of things, just to guide you, towards this broadcast. And would want you to share on your pages. So if you're on Facebook, YouTube, and we're also broadcasting to Twitter as well, Lighthouse INT, and that's Lighthouse International. So it's at Lighthouse INT. So we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and we're also on Twitter. So it would do you a lot of good if you can, and it'll be helpful to other people out there who would want to join this broadcast. For you to just share on your page or start a watch party as it's usually done on Facebook. So stay with me. I'll be back in a little while. Well, if you are just joining us, welcome to the conversation with Shola Adesoye. Well, if you've been a part of the conversations we've been having in the last 6 weeks, I am sure that you can testify that it has been impactful. It's been insightful. You've experienced the paradigm shift, and it is helping you with the key attributes that is required at a time like this, and it is adaptation. We're in unprecedented times. None of us have been this way before, not in this generation. And so we're needing to learn quickly. And this is not the time to saunter through, the park, so to speak, in the path of knowledge. But this is a time where you've got to be quick, you've got to be sharp, you've got to acquire all the knowledge that you can and all the tools you've got to pick up and all the skills as well, because this is a scenario where, you could put it that it is the fastest that will really gain the advantage. And we've got to be quick to position ourselves. And that's another word that has become a recurring decimal in our conversations. And it's the fact that life is about positioning. So it's about strategic positioning. And as you hear and as you engage with our platform, I'm sure that you will be able to position yourself aright so that you can seize the moment, gain the advantage, and run the race effectively. And so this is going to be, like I said earlier, it's going to really be a wonderful, 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 impactful time. And I'm going to be bringing up our guest this evening. And he is no stranger to some of you, but I know that for others, we may need to introduce him. And he is Dr. Charles Omole, and is coming to us all the way from the United Kingdom. It's good to have you here, Dr. Charles.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to join the conversation.
That is awesome. Really great having you. And Dr. Charles is a lawyer, he's a security consultant, he's a strategist and a trainer. and is one who has had the privilege to speak to governments, across the globe, in Nigeria, in the United Kingdom, and in other parts of the world. So he's coming to us with depth of knowledge, depth of understanding. So, Dr. Charles, really good to have you on this broadcast. And I mean, I'm excited, looking forward to, some real depth of insight and knowledge this evening. If you're just joining us, we're just about starting. So we'll just hit, the ball and get some pace here. Now, our topic is the global shape and structural shift post COVID-19. Maybe I'll start by saying, did you see this coming? Maybe there were indices from, where you operate from, because for many people, we woke up one day and suddenly a virus is defining our life and to some degree our future. It's defining the economy of nations. It's changing the marketplace. It's affecting governments all over the world. So what was it like for you? Were there pointers that this was going to hit us, or did it just hit you like it's hit so many other people on the face of the world?
Well, I mean, it would be easier for me to say, oh, I saw everything coming. I even knew the date it was going to be released and all that. No, but the answer is no. But as a student of history, I've not been surprised by what happened. Because when we're talking about structural shifts in the world, that usually falls into two categories. I call it a shift by design and shift by default. You see, shift by design is when a nation or group of nations decide deliberately to shift structurally. For example, when the countries in Europe in the 70s decided to come together, well, actually started prior to that, but when UK joined in the 70s, that was a decision to form the European Economic Area. That is a supranational agency that was created, but that was a shift by design. The governments chose to do that deliberately. Then the second type of shift that takes place is shift by default. That's a shift that you are forced to take, not because you planned it, but because things have happened that are not within your control, and therefore your normal will have to change. So COVID-19 is an example of shift by default, because we are not in control of its parameters. As a result, governments, groups, organizations have to respond to this shift one way or the other. Now, if you look at the world in the last 200 years, shift is normal. Shift happens both by design and by default. After World War I, that was a different, that was a difference. After World War II, the world shifted, after, if you're looking at it from within national boundary, a country like Nigeria, for example, after independence, there was a shift. After the Biafra War, there was a shift. There are things that happen in the life of nations or group of nations that causes a shift to take place. You see, that is by design or by default, but this one we are dealing with is by default. We have not designed it, and therefore responses are all over the place, and that is part of what we're looking at. We're going to look at today in our discussion.
Well, thank you for throwing light on that. So we are in a shift by default. Now, and this is not localized. So this broadcast is coming from Nigeria. This is global. One of the things that we have seen happen, and it's been a recurrent, I think, an obvious recurring decimal, is that leadership across all levels is being tested. And so whether it's, in nations, organizations, in churches, everyone is really looking and saying, okay, let's check out the quality of leadership to meander or to navigate us out of this. Now, you're within a slightly different environment. You're in the United Kingdom, and yet your heart is in Nigeria because you are a Nigerian. So when you compare the two, what's happening in the UK that's slightly different or significantly different from what's happening in Nigeria?
Well, I think the major difference I would say is this. You cannot build something on nothing. The little is like we say, is the little foxes that that spoils the vine. One fundamental difference I see is the little things government in the UK have been doing for their people, creating by and large a contract, a civil contract between government and people. That has created a level of trust in government. I mean people trust the government in the UK, even if they say they don't trust the politicians, but they trust the institutions. The institutions here are strong. So because we realize that government come, government go, institution remains. So when this started and certain urgent decision needed to be made, that foundation of trust allowed the government to make far-reaching incursion into people's civil liberties and some other restrictions without people complaining much. But the problem I see in Nigeria is a situation where you're talking of a foundation, and that's the same with several other African countries, a foundation where the trust between the people and the government does not exist. So whenever government does or says something, it's questioned. Intent is questioned. The execution is questioned. So many questions arises. So and also we are here in the UK. You're dealing with a government where there's a social security system, whereby if you are out of work and you don't have, whatever, government have a system whereby they provide housing for you, they provide stipend for you to live on a weekly basis. This has been the case in this country since after the Second World War, when there was a shift that created the welfare system here in the UK. So people are used to that, so they never felt alone even before COVID, came in. But in Nigeria, it's a question of it's you and your ears. So that lack of trust and lack of historical basis or historical antecedent of government looking after the people in the very, patriarchal and caring way, I think has led to a situation where, a lot of government initiatives are not being embraced as it should have been embraced, and people are not trusting what government is saying or doing in Nigeria.
So, I mean, well, thank you for that insight. What's at the mind or on the mind of many Nigerians naturally will be, so how do we get there? I mean, how do we? We've got a history, and I must give it that Nigerians probably in the last maybe 12, 15 years, or rather from 1999, have been extremely hopeful and have been expectant about good governance. Okay, so since this turn into democratic system of government from 1999, but it suddenly looks as if all hope is lost because people have expressed their hope. They've gone to the polls. They have believed. They have prayed. But yet, look at the scenario that preceded the lockdown in Nigeria, where, first of all, government said palliatives were going to be distributed, all across board, to the underprivileged in Nigeria. And we understand that, I mean, well, yes, some people got some, palliatives or some kind of funding, but lots of Nigerians are saying, look, nothing came our way. And so we were forced into a lockdown, situation. And then people began to scream, and it because they were hungry, and government seems to have been forced to ease down to ease the lockdown. And my perspective is that, we're moving towards herd immunity. My perspective is that the mindset of government is let everybody go catch it. Those we know the percentage that would die, and we know the basically a certain percentage would leave, and we would get to the point of herd immunity. So, Dr. Charles, you speak to leaders all across board. I mean, how do we arrive there? Is the electioneering process sufficient?
What you've just described, that's happened in Nigeria is what we call land helplessness. Land helplessness. So you've learned to be helpless. It's a state where an individual or a group of people or a nation can be where they feel that their views no longer matter. That doesn't matter what I've done. I remember, in those days, when, the military, Buhari version 1 came and overthrew Shagari, some of us were on the street rejoicing that these corrupt politicians are gone, but within 6 months to 1 year, we all regretted it. Then when the coup that brought Babangida came in, we were on the street again rejoicing that Decree 2 and all this, strong whatever is out of the way. So the point I'm making is Nigerians are always hopeful when a new government comes. That, okay, maybe this one will be better. But after you've lived through half a dozen of that, you begin to ask yourself, hold on a second, is there any point being hopeful again? Because every time you are hopeful, you are disappointed. Every time you're hopeful, so you learn to be, that's where learned helplessness steps in, where people just say, you know what, let it be what's going to be. Now, the challenge I think we have in Nigeria is what learned helplessness has done is it has created a people that have almost zero to no expectation of government. And watch this. Research has shown that the only reason that has kept a country like Nigeria from catastrophe in terms of civil catastrophe and massive civil unrest is exactly that point that people have low expectation of government. Because they have low expectation of government, when government doesn't deliver, people are just stoic about it. Whereas if expectation of government is high, there will have been crisis. So in a way, low expectation of government has perpetuated bad governance in Nigeria. Because even when you get there as a police, people don't expect you to do anything. So as a result, you don't do anything. So it's like a vicious cycle, so to speak, whereby people don't have expectation of government. And that low expectation means, let me put it this way, expectation is needed for you to have disappointment. You can never be disappointed in somebody you have no expectation of. So one of the reasons, therefore, why we are disappointed by people close to us is because I expect you to do this. I expect you to do that. When you don't do it, I'm disappointed. So to safeguard themselves, people naturally will reduce all expectation of government. And what you now see as a sign that expectation is so low is some people are now praising governors for paying salaries of their workers. So, that shouldn't be something that you shout about. That's by default is your job to pay salaries. But because expectation is so low, anything that even normality is not celebrated as so we're not even going beyond normal yet in Nigeria. We're just trying to get to normality. People are celebrating basic things governments should be doing. So it's going to take a while for that expectation to be ramped up, for people to believe again that, yes, I have expectation of it. And it's only when that happens, that's when you begin to see a different response from Nigerians.
Oh my goodness. That you just dropped the bomb there. Literally no expectation from the people. And that's why we can't force good governance, so to speak. And it just hit the nail on the head, because quite clearly Nigerians really will celebrate anything, just like you've said. Salaries are paid. We carry placards to say this is the best governor, whereas this is what is expected. We shouldn't be thanking them for paying us because we worked to be paid. And, again, if we take the in, so 2023 is around the corner, another election year is coming. And look, lots of Nigerians are not happy. Some are comfortable with what government is doing. Again, government assessment, is rather objective in some regard, except there are clear benchmarks. Again, is that for most times in Nigeria, what are the benchmarks? Somebody comes and builds a road, and if that's all he does, you say he's done well. So because those benchmarks are not there, how do we truly give a government that's in power, pass mark? So going into 2023, look, what hope is there? I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of Nigerians now. Is there something we can do?
Well, I mean, going into 2023, I think, I was talking to somebody the other day, and he said, doctor, it doesn't really matter. Our vote doesn't count. So, government will do what they like. I said, that's not correct. I said, your vote counts. If your vote doesn't count, they won't be buying your vote. If your vote doesn't count, they won't be paying 5,000 naira, whatever it is they pay for people to vote for them. If it doesn't count, they will just ignore. So the fact that they are buying your vote is an acknowledgement that your vote is important. So your vote count. I think what needs to be done. I think the challenge Nigeria have, is the accountability system that we needs to be done at the stage of selecting candidates. You see, a lot of the time when the parties have selected candidates, that's when we think no, it's too late by then. Because it's fait accompli. The devil and the deep blue sea. Which one are you going to choose? Are you going to choose? It's at the stage of choosing candidates. And one of the things that can happen. Last week, the independent candidacy bill had a second reading in the House of Reps. Let's hope they pass it. Because that could be a game changer, where you don't have to be involved in party structure, so to speak. To be a candidate. But I also think in terms of being prepared, we need clear matrix. You see, one of the ways government is not just Nigeria, by the way, it happens globally, but it's a big time in Nigeria. One of the ways government confuse people with their promises is when promises are couched in monetary terms rather than clear output. Let me explain. We're going to spend 50 billion naira on education next year. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. But if you say, we are going to build one new school in every local government, that's easy to track. So when you see government couching promises in monetary terms, it's an attempt to confuse you because that money can indeed be spent and you have nothing to show for it. So you will need much clearer benchmarks. So it's not just about I'm spending 50 billion. What are you spending it on? We are recruiting 50 new teachers in every state. That's easy to measure. So get away from monetary promises. Whether it's 10 billion, 50 billion, it's not important. It has to be clear. And number three, the strategy has to be that Nigerians have to start the game of 2023 now. Don't wait till 6 months, 9 months to the election, and then and then start. Then that's number 3. Number 4, Nigerians need to pay more attention, and this is what breaks my heart the most about the political situation in Nigeria. They need to pay more attention to who goes into the legislature. Nigerians have not paid attention to that for a long time. Everybody wants to be president. Everybody wants to be president. Everybody wants to be governor. But who goes to the House of Assembly? Who goes to the National Assembly? People don't really care. And if you see a situation where a well-articulated, educated Nigerian who can contribute well wants to be president, and then a motor packed out will be the Speaker of the House of Assembly. So we've allowed all these loutish people to populate the legislature, and as a result, they are puppets. And the puppet masters are the governors or whoever they are, whatever it is. So one thing we need to understand is if we target the legislature, I tell you this, there's legislature that is independent and has muscle, is only control over the executive. Because not only can they pass law, they can remove you legally. If they pass a law and the president vetoes it, they can override the president's veto. The legislatures are very powerful, but we've not allowed the right kind of people are not going there. And then everybody wants to be president. Everybody wants to be governor. And that is where the mistake is. Target the legislature. That's when we begin to see the change in our country.
Well, thank you again. You've just basically said to us that we still have a long way to go, but we must start right now. And I mean, thank you for bringing, the legislature into view and for making us realize that's where the power is. And it's quite true that most people would go, look, I want to be president, I want to be a governor. And they just say, look, well, that's for those who don't want to be governor or president. And it's truly where we've gotten it wrong. Again, let me bring something to your view. And you were instrumental in making contributions recently to the quarantine bill that was hurriedly first reading, second reading, and the House of Reps wanted to pass into law hurriedly. Again, look, when you look at that act, so this is the legislature again, and they are supposed to be close to the people, but then they come up and cook up such a draconian bill, obviously, plagiarized from the Singaporean, from Singapore, which is not a true democracy, so to speak. And your contributions were significant. I know that you forwarded it to the Speaker of the House. I don't know whether there are considerations, whether you've been invited. You may not want to share that here.
No. I mean, it's something I've shared also on my social media. When I published my own version of the bill, because I went through all the 50 pages, and I, I felt to be constructive. Let's give them an example of what a bill should look like. Yes, it was sent to through somebody who is a friend, sent to the Speaker's people. And incidentally, the following day, one of the special advisors to the Speaker got in touch, and he explained that the Speaker told him to reach out to me, and we had a long discussion along so many areas and how the bill can be perfected. And I'll give him credit. The following day, I woke up at about 7 a.m. and looked at my phone. What actually was a message from the Speaker himself. He reached out. There's no point in me disclosing the content of the message, but the point is, it was more or less saying that that through the public consultation, that he wants me to be involved in a public consultation to help perfect the bill. I think it's come to a realization that the bill did have so many imperfections. So the plan is to work with him and the House of Reps to perfect the bill, because the truth is we do need a new bill, because the 1926 Quarantine Act is completely obsolete. I mean, if I tell you now that if you disobey, I will fine you 200 naira, you will laugh. But that is what is in the Quarantine Act. The financial penalty for disobedience within the Act, Quarantine Act, is just 200 naira. Clearly, in 1926, 200 naira must have been a lot of money, but that's the law we are working with today. 200 naira fine, So we need to change the law, but they went about it the wrong way, and I think they've learned their lessons. Yes,
I think that's encouraging hearing that. And the reason why I brought this question is, most times you find lots of well-meaning Nigerians who are willing to make positive contribution to government, to the legislature, and even the judiciary. And yes, they may reach out to you, and thereafter, whatever you've submitted to them just gets chucked into the bin, and they continue, business as usual. So, I mean, that is commendable. And I think that it's important also for those who are viewers to know that, and for other Nigerians who are going to be watching this broadcast, to know that at least we've got some semblance of leadership in the House of Reps, especially with respect to, the infectious bill that is being revised. Now, let me try to bring this in, and then we'll move into, marketplace conversations. Critically, we are told, or there's the assumption, that Nigeria's greatest problem is corruption. Now, this administration rode on the back of the anti-corruption.
Okay, I think the system is frozen.
Hello, can you hear me, Dr. Charles?
Oh yes, you're back. Yeah, that's great.
I'm
Yes.
so sorry.
No, it's
So
okay.
it's just amazing, the kinds of things that happen with technology. Well, I must apologize, viewers. Sometimes you do your best, and this is the first time this is happening on any of our broadcasts. Well, so corruption.
Yes.
This administration rode on the mantra of anti-corruption, and here we are today. So what's your take on this corruption issue? Because to the best of my knowledge, as long as you're dealing with fallen man, corruption is going to be a recurrent decimal. So is that our biggest problem in Nigeria?
Well, the best way I will answer this is was a few years back. I think it was about, I don't know, three years ago. I was part of Nigerian delegation to China, and then to sort of examine some national security issues. And I remember asking one of the officials, and we were joking, and he said to me, privately, he said, "Nigeria is a little bit like China." I said, "Really?" I pretended as if I didn't know where it was going. I said, "Tell me." He said, "Well, in Nigeria," I said, he said, there's corruption in China. He said, "There's plenty of corruption in China, just like in Nigeria." I said, "So what's the difference then?" He said, "The difference is that in China, the officials might collect bribe or kickback or whatever you want to call it for giving you a contract." He now looked at me, he now came closer to me. He said, "But if you don't execute that contract, you are dead." That caught my attention. In other words, what he was saying is China is corrupt, but they're developing with the corruption because there is what? There is no impunity. So what we have in Nigeria is actually impunity, not corruption, not just corruption alone. Because there are many corrupt countries all over the world that are growing. Look at the Transparency International corruption index. Many of the countries that are growing, they are developing. If you look at the last 20 years, why are we not? So it shows, you see, the difference, to understand the corruption in Nigeria, you need to read the House of Representative Committee report after Yar'Adua became president. The House of Representatives set up a committee to probe or look into contracts awarded by the Obasanjo administration. I almost cried reading that report because they began to name contract by contract that there has been 90%, 80% advanced in terms of payment. They went to the site. They've never cleared the site. It's still bush. So when we're talking about, so that's not just corruption, that's impunity. So because whoever collected 90% mobilization to build something has not even cleared the forest that is on the land, knows they can get away with it. And that is the problem we have in Nigeria. And this is captured very well by a famous video by Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister of Kenya, where if people can Google it, it's a very funny video. He said he went to he said he's talking of story between a Nigerian minister and a minister from an Asian country. Now, whether this is real or a joke, I don't know. He said so the Nigerian minister visited this Asian country, and so during one of the evenings, the Nigerian minister visited the house of this minister. And the Nigerian minister said, "This is a big house. How can you afford all this house, as a government minister?" He said the Asian minister called Nigerian minister to his window, said, come and see. He said, "Can you see that railway line? That's 90% railway line, 10% this house." He said they laughed, He said a few weeks later, the Asian minister visited Nigeria. And of course, went to the house and answered Nigerian minister, this is even bigger than my own. How can you afford this? He said the Nigerian minister called the Asian minister to his window and said, "Look," he said, "I can't see anything." He said, "Yes, that's 0%, 100% this house." now, it's a very, everybody laughed, but it captured the essence of what's going on in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
That what is going on in Nigeria is not just people stealing money, it's people stealing it with impunity, knowing that there's nothing anybody can do about it. In fact, let me say something here. I'm not breaking any national security rule here. People, when they steal, one of the politicians told me this in confidence. He said, "Look," he said, "you don't understand. You say you always complain about us stealing." He said, "You don't understand that when we steal, our stealing," he said, "for example, he said, if I need to steal 1 billion, he said, I'm going to steal 2 to 2.5 billion. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the other 1.5 billion is my fighting fund. When I'm arrested for it, that's my settlement pot. So by the time I finish settling, I still end up with my 1 billion that I intended to steal all along." I mean, can you imagine? So that's why when you hear about stealing in Nigeria by these people, you say million is no longer it's billion is now the beginning. The bigger, the better. So what's happening in Nigeria, I think, it's wrong for us to say it's just corruption. There are many corrupt countries. What we have in Nigeria is impunity. Knowing that I can steal and I can buy my way out of it. That, for me, is the biggest problem we have. I mean, there's no country that's not corrupt. I mean, is it America? Is it the UK? I mean, there's corruption everywhere. So that's why I'm saying that we can't say, "Oh, corruption is the problem we have." The problem we have in Nigeria is impunity. And that impunity spreads beyond just financial corruption. It reflects itself in abuse of power, for example. You know, we're talking of extrajudicial killing, you know, or during this COVID-19. You know, like I was saying, I was telling people the other day, I said that extrajudicial killing in Nigeria is systemic. Because if you look at the National Human Rights Commission's report, the police were indicted for killing, civil defense were indicted for killing, army were indicted for killing, even the task force set up by state governors were indicted for killing. So if everybody that has uniform is killing, it shows it's not just a Nigerian police problem, it's a systemic problem. That anybody that has power in Nigeria feel they can abuse it and there's no fallback. It's still the same impunity. There's no fallback.
But where does the judiciary stand? I mean, you come from that context and you're a lawyer. So isn't the judiciary now, you know, the arm of government that must help to ensure that impunity comes to an end?
In theory, yes. But what people do not know is that our judiciary in Nigeria, and I'm choosing my word carefully because quite a lot of them of the judges are my friends. The judiciary in Nigeria has been largely compromised. And, you know, I'm trying to find a way of saying this without, you know, causing a major scandal. Listen, you have to trace it from the way judges are appointed in Nigeria. Judges are not, you don't apply to be a judge in Nigeria. You are nominated by other judges. And then what happened? There's already a scandal going on right now where judges are their sons and daughters, they are nominating. You know, and once you enter the bench, that influence will carry through with you till you get to Supreme Court if you ever get there. So you have to look at it from the crop of people we have as judges. There are people who are, you know, are prone to being influenced. Let me put it that way. And anybody who says judiciary is independent in Nigeria doesn't know the facts. You cannot really be independent until you are financially independent. You know, there has to be a change in the law that gives the judiciary a first-line charge, whereby it's not up to the president to determine how much the judiciary gets. There has to be an element of financial independence for the judiciary. They can do their own thing before you begin to see any change. And the problem we also have with our judiciary goes beyond just the judges, the court staff, the workers. Hey, and look, the kind of mess going on in the judiciary in Nigeria, how your case can disappear, your case file can disappear for 5 years. You know, all kinds of things. Some of these things are not just the judges, everybody within the system. And the solution to this is partly bringing technology. Let me give you an example. I was speaking to a lawyer a couple of years ago. He had a case, you know, a big client within the oil industry. So he showed me the paperwork of the case. And I said, but this case is started bad. You know, you should have filed it, you know, at least 2 years ago. He said, oh, no, doctor, don't worry. You know, we'll sort it out. When I saw him the following week, I said, what happened about your case? He said, it's been filed. I said, what do you mean it's been filed? He said, no, he said he just went to the court, tipped the clerk 50,000 naira, and he backdated the stamp. So he just changed the stamp because everything's manually done. So he stamped it as though he filed it 3 years ago. Created a file, dated it 3 years ago, and put it in the system. So a case that was started bad is now within the system. Now, that has nothing to do with the judges. That's just the court officials. So you can see that the whole system is rotten. Whereas if it's an electronic system that timestamps when a case is imputed, you can't backdate that. Exactly. So a lot of things, that's happening manually in Nigeria is because manual activity is easier, aids corruption. They don't want to electronize or digitize anything. They would rather have everything manually done because that gives them control until we begin to do things electronically as much as possible, which we will come to later. That is when we begin to checkmate all these things.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charles. This is getting really exciting, and I do wish we could just stay with with government and governance, but we're going to need to move to the marketplace also, and have some conversations, because there are people out there who really want to understand what's happening and how they can position themselves, accurately. So if you are just joining us, welcome to the conversation. My guest is Dr. Charles Omole, a lawyer, security consultant, strategist, and trainer, all the way from the UK, connecting with us. And thank God for technology, because right now, wherever you are on the part of the world, we can just hook up with whoever and bring them in, and have some kind of dialogue with them or conversation with them. This is the conversation with Shola Adesoye. Just 10 seconds and we'll be with you. Well, we are back, Dr. Charles. So, COVID, I've been saying this, before COVID is BC, after COVID is AC. So here we are, where the dynamics of the marketplace is clearly changing. And one of the clear signals, from the advent of COVID, is that the marketplace models will have to experience a shift from what has been called a historically rigid model to that's predictable. Now, nothing seems to be that predictable anymore. Even for Nigeria as a country, when you look at, the price of oil, it has suddenly, brought in new considerations for us as a country. So what are your thoughts? For entrepreneurs and for those who are out there in the marketplace, what trends are you beginning to see? Where should people be focused? Where are we heading?
Okay. Now, you see, to understand what I'm about to say, I think I need to set the scene. The scene is that businesses in Nigeria, in my opinion, and the research I've done, can be categorized into three categories pre-COVID. I call the first category, I say, intranational monoterritorialists. Intranational monoterritorialists. The second is national monoterritorialists. And the third one are what I call international players. The intranational monoterritorialists make up 90% of businesses in Nigeria. By that, I mean, these are businesses, if you set up in Ilupeju Street, 99% of your customers are in Ilupeju Street. It's local. And a lot of your, and your sphere, your customer base is also local. 90% of businesses in Nigeria are like that. Then you have about 8% that are what I call national monoterritorial, which means they sell across the state line. And then you have the final 2% that you can call global players. Now, that will change post-COVID, or that can change post-COVID. And it's very important for people to understand that, because there'll be a mass movement to online business model. An online business model favors the underdog. You see, because if you are operating your business from your basement or from your garage, all I can see is your website. And your website, if it's as good as that of the top companies, I will ascribe that value to your company. So your online image, going post-COVID, your online image will supersede your offline image as a business. Your online presence will supersede your offline presence, because that gives you an advantage as a small business. You can punch above your weight post-COVID. You know, there's greater move online. In fact, was it not Jack, the head of Twitter, that put it out yesterday or the day before, that all the staff that have been working from home during the pandemic, they're not coming back to the office, that they will stay working from home. You know, that is a direction of travel of many businesses now. You know, so online image will supersede offline one. So we need to understand, therefore, that every business needs to create an online presence, because you cannot transcend your locality without an online presence. You cannot transcend, even within Nigeria, you cannot transcend your locality. If you, I mean, 90% of Nigerian businesses, all their customers are within the state they're operating. They're within their locality. You know, that creates difficulty for expansion, because you are fishing from a very small pond. Whereas what you need, people in other neighboring states need what you said, rather, they need it. But they have no way of knowing you even exist in the first place. So online presence becomes absolutely key for businesses. You know, and what that also means is this: as businesses move online, as they become more trans-territorial, cash will reduce as a medium of exchange. You know, this is the greatest help to the cashless policy that CBN has been pursuing. Because once you become trans-territorial, you can't begin to carry, you know, people can't order from neighboring states and be paying you cash. They have to pay electronically. So as businesses go online, cash as a medium of exchange will become relegated. People will now be paying through bank transfers and through online payments, you know. So it's very, very important. Also, in terms of the shape of business opportunities out there, I read a research last year, early January last year, which said that by 2040, 40% of jobs today will be obsolete.
20%.
40%.
40%.
By 2040, 40% of jobs today will be done by machines. Because already now, there are restaurants in Japan where the waiters are all machines. You know, in fact, there are restaurants in Japan where the chefs are machines. Robots cook your burger. They cook it because to perfection. It doesn't get burnt because they've been programmed to know it's 3 minutes or whatever, you know. They're doing that. And I remember, was it last year? Last year, I wanted to do one of my trips to California. In one of the hotels I stayed, I ordered some room service. The next thing I had was by the doorbell of the room. I opened. It was one robot in front of my room. And opened up, and I took my food. So
wow.
and I called. So the robots are doing the room service. So this is now, not 2040. So a lot of jobs being done today will be done by machines then. Now somebody said, but we are Nigeria. No. This is where it's going to be different. Because even the government in Nigeria will not be able to resist this. Let me explain. A lot of government have moved their services online because they did it by design. So they decided, between 1998 and 2002, across Europe, there's this big, massive drive to what we call e-government or electronic government, whereby a lot of things that were done manually were being done, were not being done, being put online. You can now apply for things online. That collectively, as a group of nations, that was a deliberate decision they made. So that was a shift by design. But what's going to happen for countries like Nigeria is, one, money will be scarce. As money gets scarce, government will have to look for how to maximize their take. Going electronic will become the easiest route for them, because that's in fact the only route. If you remember, when Obasanjo came as a president and he cancelled all the toll gates, you know the reason why he cancelled all those toll gates? There was a report that came out then that showed that more than 50% of the tolls being paid never gets into government.
Never gets to government, yeah.
So he decided that if that's the case, government won't miss it. So scrap all the tolls. But for me, that was a wrong solution to a problem. because there are ways things it could have been done. But anyway, that's a different argument. But the point I'm making is government now want to maximize their income or their revenue because they don't have as much as they had before. So moving services online becomes now a no-brainer. So as services are moved online, people will need to be reskilled. People will need to be reskilled. The problem, Nigeria is the only, let me put it this way. I'm thinking, yes, I've been to at least over 60 countries, worked in 40 of them. I will say Nigeria is the only country of those 60. I don't want to say globally because I've not been to every country in the world. Of those 60, Nigeria is the only country I've ever been. They're both at your leaving the country and coming into the country. You are encountering multiple agencies. In most of on every other country I've been, even in the US, you see one person, they interrogate all the necessary databases and clear you, and you go, that's it. But in Nigeria, you first of all queue up to see the SSS. They will stand, they will dance here, they give you, then you now queue up the second time to see immigration. What nonsense is that? That is the mentality we have in Nigeria. We are still thinking analog in a digital world. One officer should be there and interrogate all the databases that need to be interrogated. And then we'll know whether you are clear or not. But no. But Nigeria, everything has to be manually done. And it becomes tedious. So government themselves are waking up to the reality that we need to sharpen things up and things will move, more electronically. And one last thing I want to say about this before we move on is that one of the shifts that COVID would bring in the Nigerian landscape, business landscape, is there will be increased respect for intellectual property. Nigeria is one of those places where, knowledge economy is not very strong. It's not even valued by many people. If I tell you I'm selling this pen, and this pen is 20,000 naira, average Nigerian can relate with it because I can see the pen. But if I say I'm coming as a consultant to help, re-engineer your business process, it's like, what's that? It's invisible. I can't see what you're doing. So Nigerian system doesn't value service that is intellectually based. They value product they can see with their eyes. Or even service they can, if you're a cleaner, that's a service. They can still see that. So knowledge economy is not being valued as it should. And there's a book I read many years ago, the title of the book is called The Empire of the Mind. And one of the key quotes in that book states that, he said, in the Victorian era, he said in the pre and post-Victorian era, he said the containers of wealth and empires were in state homes and palaces that fathers bequeathed to their children. He said, but in the 20th, 21st century, the empires will no longer be those structures. It will now be empire of the mind. Those that know will dominate those that don't know. He said, therefore, knowledge economy will become the key going forward. And that is absolutely correct. Knowledge economy, which is not being valued currently in Nigeria as much as it should, is what would become more prominent going forward in Nigeria because the need for it become obvious to all.
With what you've said, Dr. Charles, it also means that even our institutions of learning need to be recalibrated as well. Because they have remained in this archaic mold and just there doing, teaching and learning has been within the same mold that it's been through time. And it's got to change if we must become a knowledge, economy-based society and country itself. And that's a significant transition that is required. Significant transition. Again, that goes back to policy formulation. And, if we touch policy again, that may take us into some other depths that I don't know whether we'll have time to come out from, because maybe we'll touch on it. What's your take on the education policy? Now, hear this. A friend of mine had his daughter, in University of Sussex, and in her first year, she was studying psychology, if I remember, and she had, enrolled in a top Nigerian university here, and had gone with, the program, the curriculum, and all, and she showed her university professor, and the man said, well, is this the best of what you've got in Nigeria? And he said, well, this is where we were 12 years ago, because we are constantly updating our curriculum. So if the best Nigerian university happened to be where the university in the UK was 12 years ago, I mean, what are we doing in terms of, education in Nigeria and our policy? Because you've said things here that are critical, especially for young people, critical to helping them position themselves. But except you are learning outside the context of Nigeria, you are almost stuck in the same ancient mold.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in terms of education policy in Nigeria, it's a rabbit hole which, if we enter, it might take us a while to get out of it. But my challenge is with the quality, even starting from primary school level. I mean, I went to a public primary school. I went to a public secondary school. Not because my parents couldn't afford private school, but because there was no need for private school in those days. But now, everybody, who can afford it, send their children to private schools, primary and secondary. So it's almost like they've given up on the public education system. And this is a problem because we have a situation where education system in Nigeria is two-tier, in the sense that there's an element for state government, there's an element for federal government, and primary education and secondary education is largely state government, except for, of course, for the federal colleges that exist. And for the states that have been going around making noise about we want more autonomy. Education is an example of how they have failed. You got the autonomy. How did you use it? The best secondary schools in Nigeria today are federal government colleges. So all these schools that you are giving as states, what did you make of it? Exactly. You didn't do a good job of it. So, by the way, we are doing a bad job of education. Meanwhile, give us state police too. And while you're doing that, give us this, I mean, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
So the key point here is there is a problem at that level. But if you are talking of the university level, about a decade ago, when I was doing, I did my doctoral research in police studies. And at that time, I was offered plenty of money, by different countries in Europe to come and, work with them. And I said, no, I want to look at policing in Nigeria. So I decided to spend my own money to do the research. And I remember one of those days, I went to all the top universities in Nigeria. One of the universities I went to, I said, look, I want to find out if you've done any research, if anything has been produced on this topic from 1965 when you started till today. The librarian, I went to the librarian, looked at me and smiled. So she took me to a room. They have these papers. Everything's were written by hand. So I have to go through, like a ledger. So each topic is written. So I spent a whole day just going through the ledger, reading each topic to see which one. So I asked her, I said, this is laborious. I said, but I can see you are building a new library building next door. I said, you don't think about electronizing or digitizing what you have here in this one. It's a new building. That's more important to you. Then she smiled at me. She said, he said, oh, guy, he said, you know that building, you know, our guy, they're able to get better from building contracts. She was open. You know, so right that, you know, so we have a situation right now where you could take a thesis, somebody submitted at Bayero University, take it to University of Ibadan, and submit it to Uklan and say as your thesis, and they have no way of knowing. But everything is done manually. I mean, that shows you about quality instantly. Here in the UK, even your coursework alone that you submit is scanned globally across all works. And if there's any plagiarization, it's captured instantly. That's your coursework. Not even talk about your, you know, but in Nigeria, there's no such thing in the public universities. So the quality is questionable. And as a result, you know, it has created a bad reputation. And I mean, and if we are to be frank, if you are talking about our electoral process and all the corruption that's taking place there, who are the resident electoral commissioners during all elections? They're all professors, exactly.
They're professors from universities.
Exactly. So how have they creditably displayed that as academic, they can do better? So
wow.
it has therefore dumbed down the need for education. People say, look, all these professors, you know, they are the same one collecting whatever, bastardizing our electoral system, you know. So what is the reputation that the universities want to thrive on? None. So for me, I mean, don't get me started on the. I mean, I have my own solution for education in Nigeria. Really, you know, requires a lot of radical thoughts. You know, I don't believe, you know, government should be, you know, in the business. It should be doing the education the way it's been done. I mean, you know, you have accreditation. Let me blow. So let me shake some tables here. You're talking about accreditation of courses in university. I know people in university system in Nigeria that when NUC comes, in fact, one of my friends who works in particular university, I won't mention names, when the NUC were coming to accredit their course, he said the vice chancellor gave them envelopes ready for the NUC folks. And I said, what for? He said, because if you don't bribe them, they will not accredit your course. They will not. It doesn't matter how good everything is. If you don't bribe them, they will not accredit your course. I'm sure NUC will bring out the statement and say that's not true, but those who are in the system know. And what do you think happened? Was it 2 or 3 years ago when accreditation was withdrawn from a law degree from University of Ife? How can you say University of Ife law degree that has produced how many lawyers? It's not good quality. Somebody is not playing ball. Somebody was not playing ball. You know, so at the end of the day, the point I'm making here is everything. So you know, sometimes when you look at Nigeria, from every angle, it can be very tiring. Because you can see that thing has infested every facet of life.
Every facet, every sector.
Every sector. So, which means that we have to start from somewhere.
That's right.
We have to start from somewhere. And one thing I know about Nigerians is this. As bad as Nigerians are, we respond to deterrence. And a very good way to know it is for those listening or watching who've ever flown from Nigeria to any Western countries. That's the easiest example I can show you. When the flight from Lagos to London, Lagos to New York gets there, and they announce that please sit down, don't stand up until the seatbelt sign is off. All Nigerians, they sit down, they don't move. Watch exactly those same Nigerians fly back home. The same announcement in Lagos or Abuja. Please don't move, don't stand up until, in fact, as the plane is taxiing, you are seeing all the phones on, people are standing up. These are the same people that obeyed it abroad. So it means that an average Nigerian, it's not that they're incapable of doing the right thing. It's just that they only do it when they feel there is consequence. Because Abraham again was okay. You take me to the airport police. I give them 5,000 naira. They let me go. So as far as they're concerned, there's nothing you can do. But they know in New York they can spend 6 months in jail.
Yeah.
If they don't comply. So
Yeah.
you see them obeying the rules there.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows therefore there's nothing in a Nigerian that is allergic to obeying the rules. It's just that we have weak institutions. There are no consequences for wrong behavior. As a result, when I mean wrong behavior, I'm not talking about just politicians now, I'm talking about across the board. No consequences for wrong behavior. So people just continue, with bad behavior.
Oh my, Dr. Charles, thank you. This is such a rich conversation. Again, if you are just joining us, it's a table shaking conversation, but yet through it all, we're finding a pathway, not just towards rebuilding our nation, but also towards our own personal development and reorientation as well. Now, many people may not know this. Now I want to move to the church.
Yeah.
And some people do not know that you are a pastor and a preacher of the word of God. And so you're a man who wears many caps or many hats, so to speak.
Indeed.
Now, if there must be, and this is my conviction, that the church is to play a significant role in national transformation. And all of these we're looking at is within a context of Nigeria. The stewing pot is called Nigeria. So here we are. The church lately, let's put it this way, has been battered left, right, and center, especially the Nigerian church. We've become, the comedians have taken us to the cleaners. The trending jokes today are church jokes. So here we are. We've had our own fair share, good, bad, and ugly. Now, especially during this pandemic, the leadership of the church obviously is under a microscope as well. Now, starting from the onset of the pandemic and the lockdown, we found the argument, and it is still going on. Why must churches be shut down? Churches, markets are being opened, and churches, are not allowed, to meet. People are not allowed to come to church, and yet the church carries healing power and transformation and all of those things. I don't know what your take is on it, and what should the church be doing, considering the salt and light concept that we read within in Scripture?
Well, I think the challenge the church has always been the fundamental paradigm in many people, church folk, that that separates church from everything else. It's almost like the two types of lives. Okay, this is church, this is everything else. But that concept is wrong, because it's supposed to be a lifestyle. It's supposed to permeate everything you do. And that concept of the church being a building, the way I tell people is, I said, look, one of the words used for the word church, we use for church, is the house of God. I said, so look, when was the word house of God first used in the Bible? You find that it was when Jacob was fleeing. He was in an open field. He had stone, to use stone as a pillow, and he had an encounter in a dream overnight. He woke up and said, this is a dreadful place. He said, the Lord is in this place and I know it not. He said, this is no other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. but there was no building. So where is the house of God? So because this is absolutely fundamental. Where is the house of God? Because there was no building.
That's right.
And even people, will quote the psalmist that says, "I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord." Which house? Because we know it was his son that built it after he died. So which house was he talking about?
That's right.
You see, so first of all, the first paradigm shift that needs to take place is that the house of God is the place of his manifest presence. And that can be anywhere. It's not about a building. So you can shut a building, you are not shutting God out anywhere. The house of God is the place of his manifest presence. If we understand that, that empowers believers to understand that everything they do in the marketplace is a ministry. Because they don't have to wait to go to church on Sunday to do ministry. Because as I mentor people in the marketplace, what I see a crisis of frustrated passion in the church. We have a lot of church folk who believe that until they join the choir or they join a department in church, they're not serving God. And as a result of this focus on building, we've now killed people with so many programs and events in such a way that almost every day there's something happening. In fact, I was having a pastoral meeting about 5-6 years ago in Lagos, and about 200 pastors were there. And I was telling them, I said, look, God can't prosper your people. They looked at me and said, eh? I said, yes. I said, I don't think God can prosper your people. He said, why? I said, because they are not in the marketplace long enough to prosper.
Wow.
You're always, Monday there's this meeting, Tuesday there's this meeting, Wednesday there's this meeting, Thursday there's this meeting. What kind of business do you think they will do to prosper if they can be in church every day? The really busy people can't do that.
Wow.
And attendance becomes faithfulness. One of the paradigm shifts that will take place as a result of COVID is gathering of crowd as church will become less frequent than it was pre-COVID.
Gathering of crowd will become less frequent.
Will become less frequent as a result of COVID. That's number one. Number two is that what I call multiplicity of spiritual engagement. Multiplicity of spiritual engagement. One of the things that has happened in many churches is the only person that some believers have ever listened to in terms of preach is their pastor.
Is their pastor.
Nobody else. Now, what COVID has done is expose them to multiplicity of gifts. And some of them, their eyes are opening.
Yes.
Because you have to understand that if God has given us the fivefold ministry gift, apostles, prophets, teachers, pastors, and evangelists for the perfecting of the saints, so that saints can do the work of ministry, it means for the perfecting of the saints need to be exposed to those 5 gifts. One pastor cannot embody all the 5. So what COVID is doing is exposing people to multiplicity of gifts. And trust me, that's not going to change. They love it. They will still listen to their pastor, but they will listen to these other 3 pastors as well. Because now they are seeing, the menu is a lot more.
That's the new face of church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that would be that, multiplicity in terms of, the expressions of their gifts. And more importantly, I say that, God always has an agenda. If you look at the whole scripture, you can divide it into four key elements in scripture, in terms of the story and the content of scripture: creation, the fall, redemption, and restoration of all things. But if you look at the focus of the church so far, it's been mostly on the fall and redemption. I tell people, I said, that can't be right. Because if that was supposed to be the focus, Jesus, after he was baptized in Jordan, will have moved from Jordan straight to the cross. He didn't need to do anything else. Once he left Jordan, straight to the cross, he will have died for us and redemption. Why did he stay? Because he wanted to model what our interaction should be with the marketplace. So the redemption bit he could have achieved without doing all the other things. And that is why, if in Colossians 1:20, verse 20, when he said, and by him, talking about Christ, to reconcile all things to himself. And I spent the whole week actually teaching on this, a few years back. He said reconcile all things. I said, remember, he didn't say reconcile all people. If he says reconcile all people, then we'll know he's talking about humans. But he said reconcile all things. So that includes human, and it means restoration of everything.
Systems, government.
Systems, exactly. Governments, everything. So why are we therefore focusing on just one dimension of this? So what this has done is to help the church to move into God's agenda. And that's one key thing that I've noticed as well. You see, church needs to embrace technology. You know why? God needed COVID to force his church to embrace technology.
Oh, that's
somebody said why? Somebody asked me why. I said, I answer simple. The Bible says when Christ returns, all eyes will see him at the same time. But geography tells us that when it's daytime in one part of the world, it's night in another part of the world. So how are we all going to see him at the same time?
Technology.
Thank you very much.
Technology.
It's people need to understand that God he doesn't make mistakes. He's in control. And the best way I like to describe this is the story of Joab and Absalom. When Joab went to play with David to say, okay, let Absalom return. And then, after pleading, David said, fine, let Absalom return, but on one condition, I don't want to see him. And Joab said, that's no problem. So Absalom returned. After a while, Absalom started sending his servants to tell Joab to come. Joab knew what Absalom wanted, which was to send him again to David. So Joab refused to go. After Absalom got tired, he just woke up one morning. He said, whose barley field is that? He said, that's Joab's barley field. He said, go and set it on fire. So his servants went to set it on fire. When Joab woke up, he said, who did this? They say it's Absalom. He carried his bag. The first place he went is straight to Absalom's house. And Absalom must have said, hold on a second, before you make any noise. I've achieved my objective. I've used all my subtle powers and indirect means to nudge you to come and see me. It didn't work. So I had to throw fire onto your barley field to get your attention. Same way, God will throw God throws fire into our own barley field.
Into our field to get our attention.
Because after he has been talking, I've been prompting, he's been hinting, and nothing happened. It will just throw fire into your barley field. Just metaphorically speaking, as a way of getting you to do what he wanted you to do in the first place. So technology will become the new normal, for the church. Because prior to COVID, I know churches that didn't even have websites. In fact, their website was purely a signboard, just maybe 2 or 3 pages to announce their address. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, but everybody is now being forced to invest in streaming technology.
That's true.
That's not going to disappear. You know, and one thing is clear. You know, God is not a hard taskmaster. It's not. That is why throughout the Old Testament, God only commanded the children of Israel to gather together as a group only 3 times a year. You know, because it's about what you do individually, not about gathering the crowd. You know, think about it. I know people in Lagos who live somewhere in maybe Ogun State, and their churches. I know people who travel 2 hours on Sunday to get to church. 2 hours, 2 hours back. That's 4 hours travel to get to church. Why? Now they can sit down at home and enjoy service. So the concept will change. You know, the guilt that people had before of not going to church physically, where the guilt is no longer there now because technology is now.
Yeah.
You know, the guilt will no longer be there.
Wow.
You know, and what that does is it makes believers to become more effective in the marketplace. That is the orientation here.
That's right.
The Bible says the Lord is our judge. The Lord is our lawgiver. The Lord is our king. He will save us.
He will save us.
Those 3 are the 3 elements of a government. God is everything to us.
Yes, sir.
And therefore, we can't keep him locked up in a building and thinking that's the only place he manifests himself. We have to understand, the Bible says, thanks be to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who causes us to triumph always, and make manifest by us the fragrance of his knowledge in every place. The fragrance of his knowledge in every place. So we at the church, where we go, everywhere we go, we carry him with us. And that is the key here. That is the impact here. You know, but sadly, the challenge, if I'm, again, let me shake another small table here. The problem we've had with Christianity in Nigeria and Africa as a whole, but let's focus on Nigeria for a second, is that we practice Christianity purely based on African traditional religion.
Yeah, you can say that
because
again.
If you look at it, that is a model. Because if you look at it, in African traditional religion, you have to go to the priest, to the priest, to speak to the God. So either the Ifa priest or whichever priest, you have to go to a particular. So we carry that to the show where you have to see pastor.
Yeah.
Number 2, if you go to Ifa priest and he says Ifa wants 5 cows, you can't negotiate. You can't say, can you manage 3 cows instead of 5? You don't. So you don't argue with the priest. So that mentality was carried into the church too.
True.
People are now drinking kerosene because pastor said so.
Because pastor said drink it.
Exactly. Are you? I mean, lots of crazy stuff happening.
Yeah.
Because it's a concept of that, African traditional religion. You know, and every African traditional religion must have a shrine. If you meet Ifa priest on the road and ask him something, we tell you, meet me
in the shrine.
He won't do anything by the roadside. So our churches have become shrine, where you must get there first before anything happens. So a lot of what people are doing are culture, not scripture.
Culture, not scripture.
Yes, and people's eyes are opening, I think. And I think it's healthy. Yeah. It's healthier for the church.
I think it's also significant for us to point to the role of the church in terms of equipping the saints for deployment in the marketplace. And it's that concept that needs to be embraced, because you find out that there's not much equipping that's taking place in lots of so-called churches. The idea that what is being done is equipping for deployment is totally out of the window. It's totally absent.
You know, wow. In the book of Acts chapter 7, the Bible says Apostle Paul got to the city and found out that the city was given up to idolatry. So what did he do? The Bible says, I think Acts 7:7, I think my memory is right. He says, Apostle Paul went to the synagogue to address the issue. And the Bible said, and he went into the marketplace daily. He understood that to deal with idolatry, he mustn't address it just in the synagogue.
Marketplace.
He has to address it in the synagogue, in the marketplace too. In the marketplace daily. Actually, personally believe that engagement with the marketplace actually makes advances the gospel more than anything else. Something strange happened between Acts 14 and Acts 18. Bible says, Holy Spirit says, separate from me Barnabas and Saul, for the work I have for them. And by Acts 19, the Bible says the whole of Asia have had the gospel. But if you look at what happened between those two chapters, between those chapter range, it's a major lesson.
Invasion.
Because chapter 18 was the change. Because it was in chapter 18 that Apostle Paul met Priscilla and Aquila. That was the beginning of the change of his ministry.
Marketplace people.
Marketplace, So I can go.
I need to bring this in. And look, the pastors I relate with, and I can tell you that COVID has changed the equation for a lot of them. And I'll tell you how. So churches have been shut down. Some of these pastors literally survive on the offerings. I mean, we talk about the informal sector and the idea that people, make a living from what is called daily pay. So you go out, you make 1,000 naira, you go to the market, you buy, some gari and whatever, and you make your meal. And so the lockdown has resulted in insufficient funds because they can't go out, whether it's the mechanic, and that's where the challenge has been. Now, if you apply that to ministry as well, there are thousands of churches in Nigeria that literally it's the offering from Sunday that the pastor is going to survive on for the week and also run ministry from. Now, with the change or with the advent of COVID, and now that churches have been shut down, many of them are having challenges surviving. And I can tell you that from first-hand experience because we've had to, provide some kind of support for some of these ones that are out there, all over the country. Now, here's where I'm going. Should churches or pastors, do they need to rethink or be more creative? Because income is going to be critical. And based on what you've said, if churches are now, if with technology, lots of pastors are out there, people are going to be giving offerings in different places. Also, you can't stop that.
Absolutely. That's already happening. Yeah.
That's already happening. So, and no matter how, you can legislate it. So do churches and pastors need to be creative within the context of credibility, or what should they do? Somebody will say they should go get a job, outside ministry and in the marketplace. What's your thought? Because this is a real challenge.
Well, I believe clearly that God will not bring you to a place where you are a burden to everybody else and even to yourself. Even the example of Levites that people use in script, the Old Testament, and if you're a student of the Bible, you actually see that Levites were allocated land. Because people thought Levites were supposed to live up the tithes. That's true. But what happens if that doesn't come? Would they die? So they have to have their own land. So people need to understand that lands were allocated to Levites. And that is for you to say, look, you can't die because people are not bringing things in. So I believe that every pastor needs to have, what I call independent source of income. That doesn't mean they need to go out and work in terms of getting 9-to-5 job. Yes, some might need to do that, but there are ways, there are things you can do. There are investments you can have. There are, especially in this online. If you go back to how we started about online business, there are skills you can, you have that you can, market online and will be an independent source of income for you. So and that doesn't require you leaving your house. The more pastors have independent source of income, it has several advantages. Number one, it allows you to better empathize with your folks who are in the marketplace.
Whoa.
You see, many pastors live in a bubble. They live in a bubble.
That's right.
I know pastors that for 5 years they've not been surrounded by one unbeliever. They're always surrounded by believers who adore them, who treat them like stars. And some of us, we are told, don't be stupid every day, when we're in the marketplace. Some pastors have never had that said to them. It's true. Dealing with all kinds of demons out there. But the issue here is, they live in a bubble. So getting involved in marketplace will show you more empathy, will give you more empathy and more understanding. Secondly, and that empathy can be reflected in so many ways. I know pastors that will wake up at 12 noon, have their siesta, have a shower in the evening, and then get to church at 5:30. And you that you are rushing from work, get to church 6 minutes past 7. And you're being told off for coming 6 minutes late. Of course, but he's been living a cushy life. He's just been, that's not the same. Pastors that go through what you go through, that is why concerning Jesus, the Bible says we don't have an high priest. That is, or we have an high priest that is taught by the feelings of our infirmities. Why? Because in every sense, we went through everything we are going through. So empathy is needed by pastors to understand that rushing down through Lagos traffic to get to church 5 minutes late is testimony. It's not something you should be telling somebody off for. So pastors getting involved in the marketplace creates empathy. It creates independence of income for them. Number three, it actually boosts the income of the church because pastor will now tithe. No, by the way, let me say this, since we are talking about church.
Yeah.
We have about 25 churches in our network across the world. And I hold pastors meeting every now and then. I tell you this, if you want a meeting, if you want to gather a meeting, then you get the least offering. Gather pastors together. They are terrible givers.
Wow.
I'm shaking that table now.
You are destroying the table completely.
They are terrible givers. Yet they will demand giving from their people. One thing is clear. Apostle Paul said, for when we have ministered unto you, not only the gospel of Christ, but even our own lives. You see, as a leader, as a pastor, you are ministering not just the gospel, you are ministering your life. A pastor that is not a giver will never have a giving church. It's as simple as that. Because you are ministering your life, not just the gospel.
Wow.
So a pastor that is not a giver will not have a giving church. It's as simple as that. So when you have all these stingy pastors, so when the pastors come to me and say, the money is tight, I say, check your own giving. Because the prophet is always a sign to the nation.
Prophet is a sign to the nation. A sign. Wow. Oh Lord. You've destroyed the table. Initially you were shaking it, but you've shattered the table completely. My.
Oh, by the way, I must say, because when I say pastors, I don't mean all of them, of course.
Yeah, I mean,
it's good to say. So you understand the spirit of what you guys said it exactly. So
yes. Oh my. Well, Dr. Charles, I don't know if there are questions out there. This is a real deep conversation, and let me try and see if we can capture some of the thoughts that people are passing out there. I mean, I can just put some on the screen. This is going to make my month. I'm really loving this. Whoa. I mean, this is hot stuff. We'll try and see if we can capture some questions. Here's a comment: pastors who are in the marketplace create empathy. This is to echo, some of the things he said. This is Pastor Olusegun Ishola. I need to view this again and again. Deep stuff here. Shola Adese and Shola Mole. It's going to be on. It's going to be on the platforms. It will remain there for you to get back in there and engage it. Great question. Pastors need to be creative. It is the work of God. COVID will separate the real from fake. God will always provide for his kingdom. Wow. Amarachi Ukeka. Engagement with the marketplace advances the gospel more than anything else. This is a very funny one. Tables and chairs are all broken now. Bare nakedness to truth left. Ha! Christianity being executed on the template of African traditional religion. It's exciting when people take the things they're hearing and they articulate it in the based on their own understanding. Equipping the saints for deployment into the marketplace. Real discourse, sir. This has been my point. We've been doing culture, not scripture. Now, this is for you, Dr. Charles. Oh my. Where on earth is Pastor Charles from? Are you from Mars? God bless you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Shah, for this amazing session. I mean, it has been an amazing time. Now, this is an interesting one. I was born in the Muslim family. Oh my, this covers you for that comment. So he's seen the truth and he's come into great light. Church needs to embrace technology to be relevant in this day and time. Well, I don't know if there are any other questions. If there are none, we may have to bring this conversation to a close, not because we are at a loss for words, but there's so much that has been said that just needs to be digested. So Pastor Shila and Dr. Charles decided to burn the table. No, we're just having a conversation for me. Okay, most pastors in Europe works because the terrain does not allow for laziness. Well, does the Nigerian terrain permit laziness? Dr. Charles, what do you think?
I don't think it's about laziness. I think it's it's about culture, and it's also about every man walks in the light of the revelation they have. And I'm expecting that all this has been said not as a way of condemning the church, but as a way of waking the church up, for us to understand that things we have ignored, things we have walked past, are the things that God will use to move us to the next level, and that we cannot stay in our own little world, in our own little bubble. In the example I gave of Apostle Paul, from Acts 14 to Act 18, he was experiencing so many setback after setback. The Bible says he will go to minister, and the Bible says, and the wicked market women from the marketplace will come before him. The Bible says, and Apostle Paul will sneak out at night, because he can't minister again. All kinds of things happening. But from the moment he met Aquila and Priscilla in Acts 18, and his profile increased in the marketplace as not just a minister, as a businessman. Now, what was happening in Acts 18, you begin to see the Bible say things like, the people went, and Bible says, and the town clerk dismissed the people. You begin to see things like, the government, the people from within the civic authority came to give Apostle Paul intelligence. Oh, don't go to that place. So it's now using instrument of state to advance this purpose. So we need to understand that, it actually, that was why the Holy Year heard the gospel. because he was no longer sneaking out at night, and he was doing in Act 17. So engagement with the marketplace give us authenticity in the marketplace, give us credibility in the marketplace, because we're able to speak their language. Every sector have their language, and we must be able to speak the language of the marketplace. And for that to happen, you need to engage with it.
Thank you so much. Let me not sound like the proverbial and from history Oliver Twist, but I think we need to do this. We need to have a part 2 to this, Dr. Charles. I know and he's extremely busy. Take it from me. Sometimes catching him, takes quite a bit of doing, but thank you so much. Really appreciate your time here. And you can see from the comments, it's really had great impact. And many more people are going to be viewing this, because we will keep it, in perpetuity on the platform, so that people can listen to it and be impacted and blessed by it. Any last words, before we bring this to a close, Dr. Charles?
Well, one thing I just want everybody to understand is that this is not a period to live in fear. This is not a period to be afraid. You need to understand that all these things are new to God. They are new to us, but they're not new to God. That's why I tell people, God doesn't begin what he has not already finished. So he has seen the end from the beginning. So, don't fear their fear. Stand your ground, embrace innovation, embrace the new revelation you will get, embrace the new promptings in your spirit that you will get in terms of how to move forward. And you understand that it doesn't matter how the wind blows, you will remain standing. And I tell people, if indeed we are the light of the world, then I assure you that the darkening of the situation around you makes the manifestation of your light more glorious. Light shining in light doesn't really have much value. It's when there is darkness that light comes into its own. So the separation, the distinguishing factor of light is the fact that it's surrounded by darkness. So we shouldn't be afraid of this. We should stand our ground, do what we are supposed to do, and let's bring this game to the end and glorify God in everything that we do. God bless you. Thank you. I think I can't hear you, but I can guess what you're saying. So that's
okay. Sorry.
I can hear you now.
Well,
I can hear you now.
My love to your family, please.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you, and we thank God for the gift that you are, not just to the body of Christ, but to the world itself. And we trust God that would have other opportunities, to engage with you.
We can work something out. No problem.
Awesome. Great hearing that. All right, then. Have a wonderful evening. Bless you.
Thank you, and you too. Cheers.
Well, what do you say to this? From shaking tables to breaking tables to burning tables completely. I mean, that's what has happened tonight. But, I need to say this, and Dr. Charles said that when we speak about the church, people need to understand that our intention is not to castigate or rubbish the church. We're part of the church, and it is not in us to rubbish the church. But you see, truth must be spoken so that people will wake up and realize that, just like Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. The church needs to be built according to pattern. And that's why we have these conversations, touching on the church. And we talk about government as well, because we find that government itself began in God. And it started in Abraham when he said, I'll make you a great nation. And the template for good governance is found within Scripture. So we want you to know that we love you. And if you're a pastor out there, we love you from the bottom of our hearts. And we pray that these things that have been shared truly will be taken to heart, and you begin to reconfigure your life based on the things that have been said. what an amazing time. And it's my pleasure. I'm Shola Adeseye, and it's my pleasure to bring this conversation to you. I know that you have been tremendously impacted, and we look forward to further conversations next week. So just stay tuned and stay with us, and it's going to be an amazing time. So from me to you, this is where we draw the curtains. Good night. Have a wonderful time, and we look forward to connecting with you on Sunday, 9 a.m., same platforms. And I'll be bringing you the word of God, during our Sunday service. God bless you and have a wonderful evening.